All right, recording is started. Over to you, Ravi.
Okay, thank you, Vaibhav. So can you see my screen, all of you?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, okay, sure. Thank you everyone for joining this evening. My name is Ravi and I have been with the PK for 8 years now. And I have about 15 years of experience, primarily on Microsoft stack, all the way from .NET to 1.1 or 1.0 days from 2003 or 4 time till today. So currently, I am working with one of our clients in Omaha. I am the delivery manager at our client Valmont Industries, and we do lots of work on Microsoft stack. So that is a little bit about me. And then let's get into the agenda right away. So recently, about 3 months back, uh, we were asked by our client team. We got a couple of emails, myself and my boss, and the client team has provided a couple of use cases and also used some terminology about robots, bots, chatbots, Siri, etc. So they used the email. We were not able to comprehend what the client actually needs, right? So they have use case and also they combined their proposal and some of the technology options. So what we did from PK side, we reached out to our center of excellence just to understand and comprehend what the client is asking for. And also I have been working with this client for about 8 to 9 years, and I have good exposure on the Microsoft tech stack. So what I did some additional research on the web and also learned from some of my colleagues in PK what the whole the landscape of bots, what are the various terminologies that different team members use, right? And I also explored Microsoft bot framework architecture in this process. So I compiled what I learned during last 3 months into this deck, and I'm going to share you what I know. And then I know some of you may have worked on bots related projects in the past, and I would like to know more from your experience what you have done towards the end of this discussion. So let's move on. So this is an interesting slide because I was reading a lot of stuff on the internet and also learning from my colleagues. I wanted to know what does Google say about robots. You can see here, right? Lots of toys, Walmart, Kohls.com, Target, various toys, and you see iRobo here. And then on the right hand side, a bit of technology definition of robo, what are robotics, and then interestingly there is a movie, Robots. So this is just for fun. Now, right? So let's start with robotics, right? So this have robots and robotics. They have been there for decades. We all know that, and you can see on the right hand side, you have a robo, and also we can call as a machine that is making burgers, right? And also you see another diagram that is basically welding the cars and the automobiles on a pipeline. So primarily this slide is to give some overview. This is just one slide on robotics and robots, right? We just want to have some introduction before we get into Microsoft bot framework. So robotics is combination of software, hardware, and multiple engineering disciplines, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. There are a lot of things that goes in, right? So and also I put a few programming languages and technologies that are related to robotics. right? I don't know how many of you are familiar with Microsoft Robotics Developer Studio. I think Microsoft retired it about 7 to 8 years ago, and then now they are part of Open Robotics. And then there is an operating system from Microsoft, robotics operating system from Windows 10. And also Microsoft has acquired another company called Bonsai. And there's a lot of research going on from Microsoft side on the robotics. And similarly from Amazon, there is RoboMaker, right? And from the programming languages, C++ and Python are some of the programming languages that are used. So that is a brief introduction about robotics and robots. And then let's move on to the next slide. So this is robotic process automation, which is completely different than robotics, right? So the word robotic is common between robotics and robotic process automation, but they are, um, I would say, very different in terms of their capabilities, right? So the robotic process automation, when we talk about it, there is no hardware. It is just software. It is a software robot, if you want to call, right? And we also hear very frequently that this is also called as RPA bots, right? We keep hearing RPA. We very few times hear about robotic process automation. People just use RPA very commonly, right? So let's take a very simple example, right? So what is the role of RPA, where it really helps, right? Uh, we will not go very deep into the technology and architecture of RPA. That is not the intent of this session today. So I will briefly touch on it, and then we'll move on to the BART frameworks. So the RPA, one of the use cases, right? So let's say there is a person who is using bookkeeping software, right? For example, there are tons of financial transactions that are coming through either email or through regular mail, right? There is a person who uses a piece of software on his or her desktop. They go through various invoices, they open their email, open an invoice, read through all the contents, and then enter that transaction details into the software, right? Into the desktop based application. So, that person, that's their job, right? They read emails, they read invoices, and they keep entering the data into the software, right? So this is a very simple example, right? So here is where RPA can help, right? So what RPA does, right? I have mentioned about a few players here, these technologies, UiPath, Automation Anywhere, any of these uh, technologies that I have listed here. There is Power Automate from Microsoft that is built on Power Platform, right? And whenever we talk about RPA, these 4 or 5 names come to the top of the list, right? So what we do, the example that I took, right? So we use one of these technologies. For example, let's say Power Automate, right? And then we teach Power Automate how to read an email, right? How to open an invoice, and which fields of that invoice are mapped to the desktop software that the person has been recording. Basically, we provide some instructions. And then, so the Power Automate works very similar to some of the test automation frameworks. It's very similar, where you record, you teach the tool how to do a certain activity, and then it will repeat those steps, right? So you can see on the right hand side, your virtual employee, you don't need a human to perform those tasks, right? And you do not need to touch your existing applications. So the example I took, where there is a software to record all the financial transactions, we are not going to touch that software or try to expose some APIs to save the data into database. We are not going to do that. So we are going to use RPA technology that is going to use the existing application and still performs what the users have, what the person has been doing for so many years. It's just automation, right? So that is a little bit of background on robotic process automation. There are tons of use cases around this. So I took one use case. So the RPA is widely used in the back offices, HR, payroll processing, claims processing, mortgage applications processing, where there is a lot of documentation, review, all that. So now let's move on to virtual assistants, right? So again, I have put some logos here. You can recognize them, right? So the virtual assistants are different than RPA completely. RPA and virtual assistants are two different things, right? So virtual assistants, for example, let's take Siri, right? We use Siri all the time to make calls. You can just say, hey Siri, can you call Ravi, right? Can you call XYZ? It makes that call and then we are done. Similarly, we can send some text messages, right? So what else we can do from the programming side, right? So I put some examples here. So Apple has provided a development kit for the developers. So the developers can use the development kit, software development kit, to write native applications. For example, we want to write an application that takes care of uh, booking a cab, right? Taking a ride like Uber or Lyft, right? So Siri kit exposes a set of intents and also they call domains, right? To book a ride. So you build the app and then you use Apple's software development kit, and then user downloads the app. They open Siri and say, hey, I want to book a ride. Then Siri will ask you, hey, do you want to book a ride using XYZ app? And the XYZ app will open and then a set of questions will be asked, right? Where do you want to go? When do you want to go? What kind of ride do you need? Which car? All that. So that is that is possible. Similarly, one can book restaurant reservations, right? So only few domains are allowed through Siri kit and Siri SDK. We cannot build uh, any industry specific applications and integrate with Siri. There are quite a few limitations, and Apple is enhancing the SDK capabilities very frequently. But yeah, so that is one example of virtual assistants and SDKs. Now let's move on to chatbots, right? So we frequently use them. I mean, we use them in our banking experience. We log into wellsfargo.com or bankofamerica.com. You see a bot on the right hand side that pops up, right? That tries to answer as many questions as it can before it forwards it to a human, right? If it cannot solve the problem, it will forward it to human. So we are all experiencing these chatbots in our daily lives, right? So we go to amazon.com, we go to customer service, then you know many of our questions can be answered by the chatbot without actually talking to a person, right? So if you look back, right, so robotic process automation, there is no human interaction there. It's just a piece of software and hardware that is helping humans, right? But when it comes to virtual assistants and the chatbots, there is that human and bots interaction, right? So the ultimate goal is naturally to enhance the customer experience, right? And a bot that can naturally interact with users by easily integrating cognitive services. So this is a very interesting area because the natural interaction is only possible, with advanced technology, right? The bot should understand what the user is trying to convey, right? Different people may say things differently, but they actually mean the same thing. So that is where Azure Cognitive Services comes into the play. Cognitive services are there everywhere. All the major technology companies, they have their own set of cognitive services. From Amazon and Microsoft also has Azure Cognitive Services. So their services, what they do typically is they abstract all the machine learning, data science, a lot of technology behind the scenes, and then provide a set of APIs for the developer to consume, right? So a couple of examples could be, you want to convert speech into text. You want to say some, and then you want to see the text translation, right? So there is an API, you just consume it. Similarly, there are APIs to identify an individual by recognizing their face, right? Those are vision APIs. So there are multiple APIs that are folded under cognitive services. And another popular cognitive service is the ability to understand the natural language that is spoken by humans. We will cover some of that in the later slides. But chatbots are very interesting, so let's dive in further. Right. So there are key players, right? When we want to build a chatbot, who are some of the key players in the industry? You see that Microsoft bot framework right on the top, and then IBM has Watson, Amazon has Lex, Google has Dialogflow. So the all these companies have their own bot frameworks, and Microsoft they completely took open source approach, not tying to any specific device or specific technology or specific framework. We will cover some of that in the upcoming slides about Microsoft's approach on the bot framework, right? So I just to want to clear here a few things, right? The Microsoft bot framework is not an RPA tool. Just want to be clear, right? It's not an RPA tool. It is not used to build robotics, right? So it is only used to build chatbots, voice bots for the businesses and the enterprises. And we will get into the details in the upcoming slide. Right. So this is a diagram from Microsoft Docs, pretty comprehensive diagram. You can see here, right? So Microsoft bot framework. So if you look at it, they have not called this as Azure bot framework. They are calling it as Microsoft bot framework. That means that the bots that you build on this framework can be deployed anywhere. It doesn't have to be on Azure. So that's their open source approach that I want to call it out right away. So that is one. And then if you see in the middle, the bot framework is built and also supplemented by a lot of cognitive services such as speech, question and answers, and the ability to understand the language, right? And then I briefly shared about vision APIs, right? That can recognize if human's face, or it could be any recognition, right? So that's the center part. And on the right hand side, right, there is let's take a simple example. Let's say on the right hand side we have knowledge, right? So let's say there is a lot of knowledge that is documented in various data sources, right? It could be a PDF, it could be an Excel sheet, it could be in database, right? All that we want to create an intelligent application on top of that knowledge, which is there in multiple sources, and provide a capability for the users to share that knowledge in a very simple and efficient manner, right? So we are going to discuss about that specific use case, how we can use Q&A capability from Microsoft that can talk to multiple data sources, and then we can build a bot on top of that, and then we can connect to various channels, and then naturally the user will provide some input. The input will be here a simple question, and then it will go through the channel, and then it will use the cognitive services, and then go to the database and data store, and then provide an appropriate answer back to the user, right? So in the interest of time, I'm just moving forward. We can definitely cover more questions on this area in this diagram towards the later part. So here one important thing is about Azure bot service. Why is that here in this diagram, right? So this is just a Microsoft has Azure bot service, that is nothing but a compute platform for your bot, right? You build a bot using Microsoft bot framework, and Microsoft Azure provides something called bot service, right, where you can deploy, publish your bots, and manage your bots there. It's nothing but a compute platform. So Azure bot service is not Azure bot framework, or it is not an SDK, it is not an API, nothing. It is just a compute platform. So so this is another slide. Most of it is pretty much covered in the previous slides, but I just want to call out some technologies, frameworks, right? So we spoke about Azure Cognitive Services. We briefly covered Azure Bot Service, which is a cloud platform, right? And language understanding is another component of Azure Cognitive Services that build natural languages for bots. And then Bot Framework Composer is a visual composer that will help developers to build bots by dragging and dropping various connectors and components. So this is an interesting slide, bot development lifecycle. So how bot development lifecycle is different than a typical application that we develop, right? We have built Windows applications in the past. We have built web applications. We have built mobile applications. Lots of experience on the development, right? So how is this different than those, right? Those applications. So the first and foremost important thing is the planning stage, which is there on the left hand side. So in the planning stage, typically we capture the requirements. In agile world, we may call them as user stories, right? We try to capture the requirements and plan the effort. So here, when it comes to bots, we need to spend a quality time in the planning stage before we start building anything, because the whole bots concept is to increase the user experience, right? We want to increase the user experience. So the planning is very, very important. So for example, what is this bot going to actually solve the user's problem? How it is going to solve the user's problem differently than a typical web application or a mobile application, right? Is the bot really going to simplify and solve the problem in 2 steps than 3 steps, right? That is one. And how quickly bot is going to provide an answer to the user is also very, very important, right? How many steps he has to navigate within the bot to get a right answer, the outcome, right? So the planning is very, very important because bots are targeted mainly for user experience. That's the top priority, right? And then when it comes to the development, Microsoft, like they have done previously for many of their technologies, right? They support multiple languages. If you take Azure Functions, for example, they support same set of languages. They support C Sharp, JavaScript, Python. So here also uh, the programmers can pick their own choice, language choice, and then start development, right? So, and then the bots, after we build the bot, naturally you can see on the top, we test them like any other application. So the testing is not different than traditional software development. We will test it, and then we will publish it, right, so that it is available and it is deployed. The bot is available, right? So because the bot is available, that does not mean it is ready for consumption by the end users, right? It is ready for the use by the end users. So we need to connect it, right? So in order to connect a bot, there are multiple channels that are supported. I have listed some of the channels here: Facebook Messenger, right? Slack, Microsoft Teams, or you may want to build your own custom web application like ASP.NET application or Java based web application, and you can integrate the bot into that web application, right? So that's the channel part, that's the connection piece. So you need it to connect it, right? And then as the users start using the bot from an application, then uh, the bot developer or the product owner can look at some instrumentation data and evaluate, take some feedback, right? That's what we do from App Insights. Similarly, for the bot, Microsoft has built some analytics platform, right, where one can go and see what has been going on with this bot, how many users have been using, how much time the users are spending, all that. And then some of that feedback can be incorporated into the development state by modifying the code, right? So this is, there are a couple of important uh, stages in this bot development life cycle. One is during the planning state, which is very, very important because the user experience is important, right? So naturally you want to plan better, plan, you want to take quality time to plan it right. And then once the bot is built, how you are going to expose that, what are the channels you are targeting, right? So the connection piece is also very important. So let's take an example, right? So what we are going to do now is a quick demonstration from Azure portal. Uh, Basically, the use case here, right? This is a real-time example that I took from one of the projects that I worked on recently. It's a proof of concept. It is not even in a project state. So I am going to demonstrate that. So the product owner gave me an Excel sheet about 4 to 5 weeks back, I remember. So that Excel sheet had about 130 or 140 various questions and answers for that product. There are various questions and answers, right? So I tried to use that Excel sheet as an input, and I wanted to build a bot to provide a set of answers to set of questions, right? I wanted to experiment how that flow goes. I have an Excel sheet, how I go about creating a bot and then testing that from a web application. And also uh, I experimented with voice capability, right, rather than plain text. So we are going to see that right now using a simple demo. So this portal is from Microsoft Q&A right? You can see here Microsoft Azure Cognitive Services and Q&A Maker, right? So I have data with me that I just told you. I got an Excel sheet, and then let's walk through the flow. How do we go about creating this bot, right? I'm signing in here. So here is an existing knowledge base that I already created. Uh, I think I created sometime back, 2 weeks back, and I modified it today, right? So what we do, I will just show you that screen. What are the important steps to create a knowledge base real quick, right? So I'm not going to create one because there is one already here for the demonstration purpose, right? So create a knowledge base, right? So in order to create a knowledge base, the step number one that you can see here, right? We want to create a Q&A service in Microsoft Azure, right? Let's see what's that Q&A service and why we should create that Q&A service, right? So I clicked on that. Right here you can see Q&A Maker is a cloud-based API service that lets you create a conversational question and answer layer over your existing data. So what we are creating here is nothing but we are basically hosting that knowledge, right? So here if you see Q&A service, we are creating the Q&A service, and then if you look at the following steps after that, all we are trying to do is we are trying to connect that Q&A service that we created here, right, with the knowledge that we are going to import from various sources. We are going to we can extract from URLs, PDF, documents, all that. We are populating our knowledge base, right, all the way, and then we are creating our key knowledge base. So creating knowledge base does not have any meaning unless we have a respective Q&A service. Basically, Q&A service on Microsoft Azure that we are looking at is an abstraction on top of that knowledge base, and it is really hosting that knowledge base here. You can see some of these fields here, right? It is asking us the production subscription name, the name of the service, right? And you can also see because the Q&A service is going to search the knowledge base whenever user asks a question. So Azure search is used here to index the data, right? And then here is the runtime. You are basically providing a runtime like we host .NET based applications in app service, right? So it's as simple as a compute engine. And then if you want to enable app insights, you can do that. So this is step number one, right? Let's assume that we have created Q&A service, and after that we are not doing anything very significant here. We go here, we choose the subscription, and then we pick, for example, I created this Q&A service before I came into this meeting. So that is V365 Q&A, right? And you can choose language English, which by default it is English. And I'm not sure why I'm not able to edit it. But let's see. And then you just provide some name here, knowledge base. You come here and then add file. You can choose any Excel sheet and then it will import that into the knowledge base. It has not yet until you create creating the KB. And also interestingly, Microsoft has provided this chit chat capability, right? Just to make the discussion, just to make the interaction more interesting with the bot. So there are various personalities. So you can just choose one of them. So, and then create the knowledge base. So let me open this knowledge base that I created so that you get an idea of how it is after it is created, right? Yeah. You can see the questions on the left hand side and under the answers on the right hand side. These are imported from an Excel sheet, right? So just look at the nature of the questions. How do I edit my forecast and plan devices or bring in new ones? This is application specific with our application called valley365.com. It's a public facing web application that is used by farmers. There are various questions like this. I have imported all of them here, and also we can I added a I added a question here right on the top as an example. Which topic is being presented today in Omaha Azure group? And then I provided answer as Microsoft Bot Framework, right? So you can add more if you want, like this. So then here is an opportunity for us. After we are done with the edits, we can publish that knowledge base to the Q&A maker service that we created in this step, right? So we published it, right? So far, if you look at it, we imported an Excel file, right? And we provisioned a Q&A service that is acting as a host for that knowledge base, right? So we have not created a bot yet. So this is this is where we start creating a bot on top of the service that we just created, right? So create a bot. So this is again pretty standard. Let me look at the bots I created and show you. Right. So this is the bot I created by following these steps here, by giving a name, right, and choosing the pricing tiers, the programming language, all that, right? Which region? Pretty standard. So I'm going to open that bot. Right. So now this bot is created, right? So after the bot is created, I'm trying to, we have this test in web chat capability. Let's ask a question. Hello and welcome, right? So let's say what is Valley 365? So it gave this answer, right? Similarly, we can say topic. So it gives you Microsoft Bot Framework. You can, I mean, naturally ask the questions differently, right? which topic is being presented today in Omaha Azure user group. You can ask the questions differently. Microsoft Bot Framework. So this is where the Microsoft is applying the natural language processing models. We have not programmed. The Microsoft is doing behind the scenes, right? Based on the data that we have uploaded. So it applied those models and extracted some keywords out of that. And then based on the type of the questions, it is providing the answers. So this is one, right? So that was a quick test how we can test by typing a text here, right? And then see how the bot responds. Let's see how we can enable this using voice. So that's where we have this option of channels, right? So in order to enable a bot using voice, uh, so we need to use a channel called direct line speech. So this is again from you can see various channels here, right? A lot of channels here. So out of that, I used direct line speech. This is an out of box channel from Microsoft Azure that you can add to enable voice, right? So let's look at what is involved in configuring direct line speech here, right? So it needs a cognitive service account that I created, test Azure speech service. So how we create a cognitive service account? Let's look at it real quick. Test Azure speech service. So let's create a new service so that we can see speech. So this is again pretty simple. You give the name and then choose the subscription location, right? And then yeah, at the end of it, you create a speech service which you are going to configure here with the direct line speech. And you can see it here running. So now that we have a bot, right? And we have configured the channel, how are we going to test it, right? So we need some client application. So the client application can be anything, literally it could be any custom application, right? So in this case, I am going to use a WPF application that is built by Microsoft to test the voice capabilities. So this application that we are looking at is a WPF application that is going to act as a client in this case. And how this WPF application is going to talk to the bot, that is very, very interesting step here. So if you look at the settings here, I just gave the connection profile name. It could be anything, right? And then the subscription key is the key here, is very, very important. So I got this one from test Azure speech service and then keys, show keys. If you look at this, this is the key that I configured here. So if you look at it, this is the client application, right? This is WPF application as an example. It could be any other application, as I said, it could be a Java based application or so. Now this application is talking to Azure speech service, and we have seen that that speech service was configured as a channel as part of direct line speech within the bot, right? As a channel. So this is how they are connected. I know I am moving back and forth, but I'm trying to explain how we are able to import a data from an Excel sheet and all the way coming to this WPF application, right? So let us verify this if it works. So I'm going to click on this, which is going to access my laptop's microphone, right? What is Valley 365? Which topic is being presented in Omaha Azure group? See, yeah. So I'm able to ask some questions, and then you can see that it is all the way talking to the bot to get an answer. Similarly, I put a reference architecture from Microsoft Docs, just to give you how we can combine the Q&A maker with the multiple knowledge bases that belongs to multiple departments, and then combine that with the language understanding as a service. This is another cognitive service. So what this is trying to do in this architecture is the bot is talking to the language understanding APIs that are built by Azure to understand the intent of the user. As soon as it understands the intent, then it is routing that intent to the respective knowledge base. So finance, HR, payroll. So there is very good documentation out there on Microsoft Docs. We can just go through, you guys can go through and read it. So and then whatever we did so far is purely from the portal without even writing a single line of code, right? So here if you want to develop parts, for example, I took .NET as a programming language. So these are the prerequisites that are needed to start the development activity, right? So I install all of them on my computer, and this is my Visual Studio, right? So here if I go on file, new project. So this is the recent project template that I have used and installed. So it is showing that, right? So I'm going to cancel this. This is what I did, and this project on the right hand side is a simple bot, echo bot. There is not a whole lot of business logic in that, but this is the skeleton, right? So this takes user input and then just echoes it back to the user. Whatever the input that user has provided will be echoed back. So but so there are a couple of important things that I would like to highlight here from the Microsoft bot framework, right? So the startup.cs, yeah, right. So here if you see this, so the bot framework adapter and the actual bot interface, right? Both of them are registered as services here, right up the front in the startup section. So you can see some of the namespaces that are used here, Microsoft.bot.builder. So these are part of bot framework. And then the controller is pretty straightforward, right? The controller talks to the adapter and then adapter actually talks to the bot. That's the flow. So the adapter is here, and the bot is here. So let me run it real quick. So IIS Express. So it says your bot is ready. You can test your bot by connecting to so and so. So I already have the emulator on my computer. So I'm going to open the emulator. I'm going to copy this. Open a bot which is running locally and say connect. So this is how from the emulator you can start debugging the application and test the application. So hello and welcome to Omaha user group. So now whatever I type here, and then it just echoes back bots, whatever I type. So very simple example. I just wanted to show you the IDE that is used and some of the prerequisites that are used to start the development process. There are a lot of samples on Microsoft Docs. And also we can just right click and publish. It is very simple. This is not different than publishing any of the ASP.NET MVC based web applications or web APIs. It's pretty straightforward process. You provide the resource group, right? Target framework, all that, and then publish it from here. So because I deployed it and I published it in the past, you can see in the portal. My first irrigation bot here. This bot is already published and available here. I can also test it from here. Yeah, so the emulator is one that you can use to test, and after deployment, you can also test it from here. So this is pretty much we covered this in the previous example, that echo bot, how the solution is structured, what are some important various classes, right? So and then I put a few concepts here, right? So around the bot framework. When we talk about skills, what is a skill, right? So how the bots and skills are different. I put some description here. This is nothing but a skill can be a bot on its own, but it can also be called from another bot. So this is basically the reusability of a skill. You can use it in multiple bots. Uh, just a quick analogy, right? We build DLLs in .NET, and then we can give it to any application. The application developer can consume those DLLs using an EXE, right? An executable. So similar concept with bots and skills. They can run independently, or you can call them from another bot, right? So language understanding we covered a little bit, but this is again part of Azure Cognitive Services. So language understanding APIs can be used while building bots. So they just complement, right? So this is an example I just thought of quickly showing you. Book me a flight to Cairo. You look at the response from the language understanding APIs from Microsoft, right? So it is matching to an intent called book flight, and we can see the score right there, almost 0.98, right? There are also other intents, but if you look at their score, it's pretty low, right? So this is how we can consume language understanding APIs while we are building the bots, and we can build advanced capabilities and more intelligence into the bots by using language understanding APIs and interpreting the scores. So similarly, if you look at order me 2 pizzas, it right away match it to the top intent food order 0.9999, right? If you look at other intents, the score is pretty low. So we can combine this. And on the voice capabilities, we looked at direct line speech today, right? And Microsoft also has another option called custom commands. So the custom commands are usually recommended for one-time instructions. For example, you want to turn the light on or turn the light off, right? It's just a command. There is no conversation going back and forth there. So in those cases, the custom commands are recommended, but the direct line speech is recommended for a conversation. For example, I want to book a flight to New York, right? That's an example. That needs a conversation, right? I want to book a flight to New York. Then the bot is going to ask me when you are planning to go, right? I will give a date. Then it will ask me how many of you are going, right? All that. So whenever there is a conversation, Microsoft recommends to use a direct line speech. And if it is just one of the example I gave you, right, turning the light on or off, then they suggest us to use custom commands. So I put some references here. This is what I read and understood to put together this deck. Then thank you.
Hey Ravi, thank you. Great session. I believe since you were running that bot in a web app, how does the pricing work? I think it will be same as a normal app service, or is there any additional pricing for this?
What's that, Vaibhav? Come again, sorry.
I'm saying the bot that you were running in a web app, right? It was a web app bot. So I believe it will have the same pricing as an app service. So is there any additional pricing for running a web app bot, or is it just same as an normal app service or a normal web app?
Normal web app. But one important thing to note is to host the knowledge base itself. You remember I created an app service separately. So that is also additional cost in addition to the cost that is involved to run the bot.
Got it.
Yeah, so there are 2 app services that are involved.
I don't see any questions on the chat window, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask Ravi. Anyone has any questions? I believe not. With that, on behalf of the user group, I thank you so much, Ravi, for taking out time for presenting. It's a great topic, and I think it was very informative session. Thank you so much for presenting.
Sure. Thank you. I'm surprised there are no questions. Either I have rushed it too much so that no one understands, or everyone understood properly, so there are no questions.
Yeah, there could be only 2 possibilities.
It must be either of that. Either they have not understood or they have understood everything.
I believe it's the later one. Everyone would have understood. The session was very informative. Okay. And I believe, Ravi, you are on LinkedIn, so if anyone has any questions and they want to reach out to you, they can anyways reach out to you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, sure, certainly, yes.
Hey, I got a question.
Yeah, please.
Go ahead.
How structured can this data be? So say, can we upload a chat log with a support request and a back and forth between a user and a support agent? And does this bot just know how to pick up questions and answers from this unstructured text, or do we need to like really structure it in a question answer kind of way?
Yeah, I think it has to be semi-structured, like a TSV file or CSV, one of them.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to export it into a format like TSV, either tab separated or comma separated. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Ravi, once again.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.